Welcome to Monday, Ground Hog Day, February 2nd, 2026. After a catastrophic truck crash, trust Grant Lawson of the law firm for truck safety, board certified, nationally recognized, with millions recovered and relentless advocacy for your justice. Visit truckaccidents.com today. Well, we mentioned it is Groundhog Day. Now, at the making of the video, Puxatawny Phil was not out of the hole yet, so don't know. But how can you have 6 more weeks of winter in this part of the country when you really haven't had winter? So we'll talk about that a little bit later on, especially later this week. But we've got scenes like that beautiful frost there in Fountain, Colorado to start the weekend, and then temperatures really started to rebound as that Arctic air retreated. Now, there is a little bit of weather this week, not much, but we have a little wave that'll come through the east side of the Rockies as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, producing a little bit of snow shower activity on the plains and in the high country, a little bit of a cool down, but we're not going to see much. A big solar flare, big X flare occurred this weekend, a strong one. We'll talk about that here in a moment. And then here we go again, back to a western ridge for about a week. So for the first 9 days of February, going to be very, very warm, well above average in the western United States as another big ridge takes shape across the western side of the United States. Will the ridge go or stay? Will it stay or will it go? Well, we'll take a look. We have another stratospheric warming event coming again. Now, we haven't talked a lot about this lately because the stratospheric warming events, while they have occurred a lot of times this winter, more than they usually do, their main impacts, as we know, have been directed to the central and eastern parts of the United States and also Europe. The stratospheric warming events have been huge this winter, but it's also one reason why the western United States has been so warm, because of where the stratospheric warming events have taken place on a longitude basis. And that's played a really big role. We're at the time of year where you start to see the chances of stratospheric warming events lessen. However, we're going to have another one, at least one more. We'll talk about that at the end of the podcast. So yes, Groundhog Day. Is it going to seem like Groundhog Day for the western United States for another week? The answer is yes, because we're just going to get up every morning and it's going to be the same thing here for a little bit while. Now, the moon has been spectacular here for the last couple of nights, and folks have been able to go out and capture it. Beautiful shot there in the Cimarron Mountains, southwest Colorado, and then another great shot of the moon as it was out. And yep, even the honeybees are like, okay, let's get going. Is it time to come out? Larry sent this from Lander. No, not quite time to come out, although I bet a lot of insect hatches will be happening early with the rate that things are going here. Another beautiful moonscape shot there, Oregon Buttes near South Pass, Wyoming. And there's a nice moon shadow in the Ozarks, where there's more snow on the ground in the Ozarks than in many other places, as we know here in the West. Beautiful shot near Pathfinder Reservoir looking out towards Ferris Mountain there, and a beautiful skyscape out in eastern Laramie County from late last week. And here's a great shot. You don't catch these very often, where you get the 360-degree effect here. Beautiful shot from Dave Bell in the Upper Green River Basin late last week. And I think a lot of our folks were able to catch that and see that as well. We had a very active sun over the weekend. That oval there showing a large sunspot that rotated around the sun and really grew and exploded over the weekend, and it flew out an X flare, magnitude 8 or better, 8.1. Now, there has not been a big coronal mass ejection yet in this situation, but the sun could be playing a role in space weather here over the next week. And Jan Curtis got his telescope out in Cheyenne and was able to photograph that sunspot complex. Now, keep in mind, this is the sun. So the sunspot area is multiple times the size of the Earth, and it's becoming Earth-facing. So solar activity, for you aurora watchers, you're going to want to pay attention to what goes on this week. The satellite photos show the cold air. You can see the blue here continues to pour into the central and eastern areas of the United States. I won't belabor the point on all the weather the winter weather that happened in the deep south in Florida and the Carolinas over the weekend. You can see some high-level clouds coming in and rotating around the high-pressure ridge. So we've got some lenticular clouds that we're going to see here today along the east-facing slopes of the Rockies. Now, we do have a little wave here coming into Seattle that's going to go up and over and down the ridge and cut across the area just like this as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday. We've got a little ripple today causing those high clouds. There's that little wave coming in behind it. As we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, the high pressure ridge amplifies, which makes that low a little bit more intense. So there will be northwest flow briefly behind this wave. It's going to reinforce the cold air in the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes again, with this high pressure ridge building along the coast. And then the big low just continues to spin out there in the Aleutians into areas on the western side of the Gulf of Alaska. So if the low is here, the high pressure ridge has got to be here, then the next low has got to be here with the spacing. So the spacing is, again, aligning the high pressure ridge across the Intermountain West. There will be precipitation. Again, nothing to write home about, but on that northwest flow, you see how the precipitation aligns itself northwest to southeast. You're going to get some snow shower activity on the backside of this system in the colder air as it sideswipe areas, but California, the desert states, just a large part of the interior west, again, is going to be under this high pressure ridge. So there's your snow excitement here for the next several days. That's going to be about it. There's the big high pressure ridge really gaining strength as we get into the day on Thursday. The magnitude of this ridge, like we have seen many times this winter, very, very impressive. How impressive? Well, I decided to look. Let's take a look at, is this the biggest, strongest high pressure ridge in all of the northern hemisphere? The answer is yes. We've got a strong ridge over here, but nothing of the magnitude of the high pressure in all of the northern hemisphere. It's right here in the west. Again, here we go again. So that's going to again bring a period of very warm conditions and dry conditions as well. So if you went anywhere else in the northern hemisphere, you would generally find colder, stormy weather, really in a lot of other places, except for right here, which has been the case as we know all winter season. I would even looked in the southern hemisphere where it's summer. It's summer in the southern hemisphere, and we don't have any type of ridge. Maybe this one right here. Australia is experiencing some very, very hot weather here, but we don't even have a high pressure ridge in the southern hemisphere that is strong. However, as we showed you last week, the possibility exists at least that the westerlies may start to bust through the high pressure ridge eventually. This is a week from today. We talked about a wave train where waves were going to form in the North Pacific and begin to accelerate and start moving into Western North America. Keep in mind, I want you to notice the shape of the polar vortex. It's getting stretched, and it's getting stretched more northwest to southeast. It's not as consolidated like it is now here. That's really important in terms of the long-range forecast. So it's getting stretched out. The westerlies, you can see the gradient. So this is by late this upcoming weekend and early next week. The possibility exists that the westerlies bust through. Will they bust through? I'm not going to guarantee it, that's for sure, but we continue to see the same possible pattern emerging. Let's talk about stratospheric warming events. This is a remarkable image. What I'm showing you is 10 millibars, or really, really high in the atmosphere. We're getting up to around 100,000 feet or so. The colors you see here are going to represent basically temperature. And to help understand the severe cold that has hit the eastern United States and Europe here currently and recently is to understand this big blob of brighter colors here in the stratosphere. Now we're looking straight down from the pole. So to give you point of reference, here's the United States, here's Alaska, okay, here's Africa, then as you get over to Europe here, okay, just to give you point of reference. So this is the current stratospheric warming event that is taking place. Opposite the yin and yang, and it actually takes on that shape, okay, is the stratosphere being much colder beside it. Now this seems counterintuitive, But on the edges of stratospheric warming events is where the coldest air is going to be at the surface, okay, relative to average. So that's where the coldest air is being pushed, because as the stratosphere expands, due to it being warmer, it pushes the colder air from higher latitudes to lower latitudes. Conversely, where the stratosphere is going to be thinner, okay, the Arctic air tends to stay underneath where it's colder, and so we don't have the latitude extent of the cold Arctic air wanting to come south. So it doesn't. So you tend to have the warmth, the relative warmth, let's say, on the other side of where the stratosphere is cold. Okay, so you're looking at a situation where this starts to make sense, how the stratosphere is driving things in terms of overall temperature scales. We have had multiple stratospheric warming events going back to November. The general pattern for the stratospheric warming events have them to be here or to be here but slanted like this, which has kept the cold waves directed to this part of the world here and not this part of the world, as we well know. So this is where we are currently. Just a huge stratospheric warming event, the most recent one. Now this is forecasted to go away, and in 10 days, what happens is the stratosphere changes dramatically again. So we go from this, where we are today, to 10 days, the stratospheric warming event, the next one forms. But what do you see that's different with this stratospheric warming event compared to the other ones we've seen? Where it's placed is completely different. Stratospheric warming event has been multiple times to our east, but this stratospheric warming event is more in the western side of the northern hemisphere. So if you were to take this for face value, what you would say is, well, if we go to the edge of where the warmer part of the stratosphere is, this is where the colder air should start to want to penetrate more often. So this is a different stratospheric warming event in terms of placement. Could it get the placement wrong? Could the placement end up being over here? I would say probably likely not, based on the fact that we're already seeing the polar vortex wanting to stretch more towards this way. And one thing that shows up in the teleconnections is the North Pacific oscillation, or what we call the PNA. Notice where it goes in a positive phase. When the PNA is in a positive phase, the west is warm. When it goes to a negative phase, the west is cold. The phase change from warm to cold occurs exactly when this is forecasted to happen. So that's what you would expect. But again, we're leaning on the models, which have been disappointing all winter long. However, I do think that the high pressure ridge, while very robust and will dominate here for another week, its lifespan, its life cycle, once it goes to an end, is likely to come to an end. There's a really good resource, a really good website that if you want to learn more about stratospheric warming events, because they've come up with great graphics and a great way to describe how stratospheric warming events will move the polar vortex around. And again, don't want to beat a dead horse, but these have been a huge player this winter in 3/4 of the northern hemisphere. The 1/4 of our hemisphere has been the area that really hasn't been affected. This website, severeweather.eu, yes, it's a European website, but they do tend to take very broad looks at all of the northern hemisphere and how big pattern changes will occur with not only stratospheric warming events, but it's a really good website to go to, especially if you want to learn more about these things. Have yourself a very good Ground Hog day. We'll see what Phil says, and maybe Lander Lil. We'll see you tomorrow.